The elevator doors slid shut with a soft metallic sound. That sound would echo in the minds of everyone inside for a long time. Bruce Lee stepped in alone, calm, focused, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. To anyone watching, he looked like an ordinary man heading to another ordinary floor. No noise, no ego, no sign of trouble. Then came the laughter. A few men stood behind him, bigger, louder. Their eyes scanned Bruce from head to toe, already judging him. One of them smirked. Another shook his head as if amused. The elevator began to move, climbing slowly, floor by floor. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "Nowhere to run, little man." The words were meant to sting, meant to dominate, meant to make Bruce feel small. The space felt tighter instantly. Steel walls, no windows, no exits, just rising numbers and growing tension. This wasn't a street where you could walk away. This wasn't a room where help could hear you. In an elevator, everyone is trapped together. The men expected a reaction, anger, fear, at least a glance. They got nothing. Bruce didn't turn around. He didn't clench his fists. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he breathed slow, controlled, almost peaceful. That calm confused them. One man stepped closer, invading Bruce's space. Another laughed louder, trying to pull attention back. They mistook silence for weakness. They mistook stillness for fear. After all, Bruce was smaller, quieter, alone. What they didn't realize was this: they weren't standing next to a man looking for a way out. They were standing next to someone who never needed one. Bruce's eyes shifted slightly, just enough to take everything in. The distance, the angles, the balance of the elevator. Every movement around him registered instantly. His body stayed relaxed, but his awareness was razor sharp. The tension thickened. Even the air felt heavy now. Someone muttered, "He's scared." Bruce finally smiled, not a big smile, not a cocky one, just a calm, knowing curve of the lips. Because in that moment, while the elevator kept rising, while the doors stayed sealed, while the men thought they had all the power, they had no idea who they were standing with, and what happened next would change the energy inside that elevator completely. The elevator kept moving, but the tension inside it was going nowhere. The men behind Bruce grew bolder with every second of silence. To them, his calm felt like permission. Permission to push, permission to mock, permission to feel powerful. One of them scoffed, shaking his head as if Bruce didn't belong there at all. "Real quiet now," another voice said. "That's what I thought." They circled slightly, shifting their weight, filling the small space with their presence. It wasn't physical yet, but it was deliberate, psychological. The kind of pressure meant to make someone fold without a single touch. Bruce remained still. His shoulders stayed loose. His hands rested naturally at his sides. His breathing never changed. In a space where panic would have been understandable, he chose control instead. Not because he had nothing to fear, but because fear had no control over him. One of the men leaned closer, close enough that Bruce could feel his breath. "You always this quiet?" he asked, waiting for a reaction. Bruce didn't answer. That silence started to feel different now. At first, it had felt empty, weak. But as the seconds passed, it became heavy, intentional, almost uncomfortable. The kind of silence that forces others to fill it and reveal themselves in the process. The men kept talking. Jokes turned sharper. Voices grew louder. They tried to pull Bruce into their game, to make him react, to drag him down to their level. But every attempt failed, because Bruce wasn't playing inside his mind. Everything was calm and clear. He was aware of every movement, every shift of balance, every breath behind him. Not with fear, but with curiosity. observation, presence. He wasn't ignoring them. He was reading them. That difference mattered. Someone muttered, "He thinks he's tough." Bruce slowly turned his head, just enough to acknowledge them. Not aggressively, not challengingly. Simply present. His eyes met theirs and something changed. There was no anger there, no hatred, no need to prove anything. Just confidence, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't rush, the kind that doesn't explain itself. For the first time, the men hesitated. They had expected intimidation to work. They had expected him to shrink, to snap, to lash out. But instead, they were facing something unfamiliar, a man who wasn't affected by their noise at all. Bruce finally spoke. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Why so much effort?" he asked. No sarcasm, no insult. Just a question. It landed. Harder than any threat. The men exchanged glances. One of them laughed awkwardly, but it sounded forced now. The energy had shifted. What once felt like control was slipping. Not because Bruce had done anything dramatic, but because he hadn't. True. Strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. And in that small moving elevator, Bruce Lee was showing them exactly what that looked like. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look or speak? Comment below which country or city you're watching this from. Elevator continued its slow climb, but now the silence belonged to Bruce. The elevator suddenly slowed. Then it stopped. No music. No chime, just silence. The lights flickered once, briefly, before steadying again. The numbers above the door froze between floors. In a tight space that already felt tense, the pause made everything heavier, claustrophobic, intimate in the worst way. Someone exhaled sharply. Another laughed, trying to sound relaxed. "Guess we're stuck," a man said. That's when the tone changed. What had started as mocking confidence turned into something sharper, more serious. The unspoken rule shifted. Now there was time. Too much time. And nowhere for anyone to go. One of the men stepped forward, closing the distance. Not enough to touch, but close enough to dominate the space. His shoulders were squared. His voice dropped. "You still think being quiet helps you?" he said. Bruce didn't move, but something in his posture suddenly changed. It wasn't obvious, not dramatic. Just a slight adjustment of his feet, a relaxed shift of weight. His body aligned naturally, like water finding its level. Anyone trained would recognize it instantly. To everyone else, it looked like nothing. That nothing made the air feel different. Another man muttered, "Say something." Bruce lifted his eyes. For the first time, he fully turned toward them. The movement was slow, controlled, almost respectful. No sudden motion, no threat. Yet the attention snapped to him instantly, as if the entire elevator had narrowed its focus. "You don't need to do this," Bruce said. His voice was calm, low, steady. Not a plea, not a challenge. A statement. The man in front of him scoffed. "Or what?" Bruce didn't answer right away. He looked around the elevator briefly. At the walls, the ceiling, the small gap between bodies. Then his eyes returned to the man's face. "Or you'll learn something you didn't expect," he said quietly. That did it. The laughter stopped. Even the confident ones felt it now, the shift in control. The strange realization that they weren't intimidating him anymore. If anything, they were being studied. Bruce wasn't tense. He wasn't angry. He wasn't preparing to explode. He was completely present. One man took a step back without realizing it. Another cleared his throat. The leader hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but that moment mattered. Fear doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it slips in when confidence cracks. The elevator hummed faintly, as if deciding whether to move again. Sweat beaded on one man's forehead. The space felt smaller than ever. Bruce's breathing stayed slow. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't touched anyone. Yet the power dynamic had flipped. The man closest to him tried to recover. "You? Think you're special?" he said. Bruce shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. "I think you are trying too hard." That line landed hard. It wasn't insulting. It wasn't threatening. It was honest. And honesty, in that moment, was more disarming than anger. The men looked at each other, uncertain now. Their confidence was draining, replaced by something unfamiliar. They had expected a victim. They had expected fear. Instead, they were standing in front of someone who didn't need to prove anything at all. The elevator lights flickered again, and for the first time since the doors had closed, no one spoke. If you were in Bruce's place, would you stay calm or react fast? Type calm or react in the comments. The silence stretched. And in that silence, everyone inside the elevator realized the same thing. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't go the way they expected. The elevator doors remained closed, the hum of the motor the only background sound. Tension still clung to the air like thick fog, wrapping every movement, every breath in a quiet intensity. Bruce Lee didn't move aggressively, but every small shift he made, slightly tilting his weight, adjusting his stance, carried a subtle command of space. In a few seconds, he had claimed more mental territory than the men behind him could even comprehend. They hadn't touched him yet, but already they were aware of his presence, deeply aware. Then it happened. A low whisper floated across the small elevator cabin, barely audible at first. "Wait, that's Bruce Lee." Another voice caught it. "The Bruce Lee? The world's most incredible martial artist?" The whisper traveled quickly. Suddenly, the elevator was buzzing with quiet murmurs. A bystander, someone who had been silent all this time, recognized him. Word spread fast. "Bruce Lee, oh my God." The men who had thought themselves dominant froze. Confidence faltered. The smirks that had seemed permanent softened, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. They had thought this was a game of intimidation. They had thought they held all the cards. But now, the landscape had changed. Bruce's calm presence amplified the revelation. He did not raise his fists. He did not shout his name. He did not demand respect. He didn't need to. Simply by being himself, focused, present, unshaken, he had shifted the energy of the room. The leader of the group swallowed hard. For the first time, he wasn't sure how to act. The man who had been pushing forward earlier hesitated, his eyes darting between Bruce and the rest of the cabin. The recognition had created a new kind of power, a psychological weight that no one could ignore. But Bruce remained humble. He didn't let the knowledge of his fame seep into arrogance. He didn't need it. He wasn't there to teach a lesson because of who he was. He was there to demonstrate what strength truly meant. Quiet, calm, unshakable. The men shifted nervously, glancing at each other. They had underestimated him. They had assumed silence meant weakness. They had assumed size and volume were the only measures of strength. Now every one of them realized they were wrong. Bruce's eyes met theirs, calm and unyielding. Not a threat, not a challenge, just presence. The kind of presence that fills a room, that asserts itself without words, that makes others step back without being told to. The elevator hummed again as if echoing the tension. Every heartbeat was loud, every movement measured. The realization that they were no longer in control sank in. It wasn't fear of violence, it was respect, awe, and a little shock all rolled into one. For the first time, the men understood what it meant to face someone completely in control of themselves. The energy in the elevator shifted, subtly but irrevocably. The whispers among bystanders continued, spreading quietly like a wave. That's Bruce Lee. He doesn't even have to move to command respect. Even the most arrogant among the group felt it. The realization was heavy. They had tried to trap him. They had tried to dominate him. And yet here they were, caught not by force, but by clarity, composure, and presence. Bruce didn't gloat. He didn't speak up to confirm. The whispers. He let them figure it out on their own. That restraint made the moment even more powerful. His fame was known now, but his true strength was in how he carried himself, not in how loudly he announced it. Every man in the elevator now understood a simple truth. Power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply exists. And in that existence, it becomes impossible to ignore. The elevator doors remained shut. The hum continued, but inside, everything had changed. The dynamics had flipped. Bruce Lee was no longer the silent one under pressure. He was the force everyone else had to reckon with. And with just that quiet, subtle shift, he had shown everyone what true mastery of self looked like without a single strike. Have you ever realized someone had power just by staying calm? Comment below if you've experienced it. The elevator moved again. Numbers slowly climbing, but the air felt lighter because now, no one in that space could deny the truth. Bruce Lee didn't need to fight to command respect. The elevator kept moving, but the tension had shifted entirely. What had started as a trap, a psychological game meant to intimidate, was now under Bruce Lee's quiet control. Every subtle movement, every measured breath, had turned the tables without a single act of aggression. The leader of the group, the one who had spoken most boldly, finally found his voice. "You think you're better than us?" he said, his tone sharper, tinged with frustration. All this calm. "It doesn't mean anything." Bruce didn't flinch. He didn't even raise an eyebrow. He simply turned to face him fully, eyes steady, voice calm but firm. Strength isn't measured by shouting, or by fear, or by trying to prove yourself to others. There was a brief pause, almost imperceptible, but in that silence, the weight of his words settled over the men like a physical presence. They were used to loud threats, aggressive postures, intimidation tactics, but calm, controlled authority? That was unfamiliar territory. You think power is loud. You think it's violence. You think it comes from forcing others to obey. Bruce continued, his tone measured, deliberate. True strength comes from understanding yourself, controlling your reactions, and standing firm without needing to prove anything. The leader's confidence faltered. His posture, once rigid, slumped just slightly. He hadn't expected words to carry this kind of force. And yet they did. A man who had been leaning against the wall shifted nervously. Another muttered under his breath, as if realizing too late that they had been trying to intimidate someone far beyond their measure. They were out of their depth, and they knew it. Bruce's gaze swept over them. Not threatening, not judging, just observing. Every micro-movement in the elevator, every twitch of discomfort, registered in his awareness. But instead of acting on it aggressively, he let it exist, let it teach the lesson on its own. That was what made him dangerous, not violence, not strength in the traditional sense, but the power of clarity, presence, and restraint. You see, he said, his voice soft but piercing, you don't need fists, anger, or force to dominate a situation. You simply need to master yourself. That is where true power lies. The group was silent now. No taunts, no bravado. Their previous energy had dissipated completely. All that remained was unease born from the realization that they had underestimated someone entirely unlike them. One man finally tried to regain composure. So, what now? He asked, almost as if asking permission. Bruce didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. His calm presence said it all. No one moved. No one dared act. The lesson was complete. In that small, confined space, Bruce Lee had demonstrated a principle that couldn't be ignored. Dominance wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was absolute control over oneself. The elevator's hum continued, the numbers ticking upward. But the psychological landscape had shifted. Irrevocably. The men who had once tried to assert control now felt themselves under it, not through force, but through composure, clarity, and confidence. Even the whispers from the bystanders, the ones who had quietly recognized him, spread through the cabin. He doesn't even need to fight. He doesn't even need to move. That's Bruce Lee. The irony wasn't lost on anyone inside the elevator. The men who had assumed power, who had cornered him and mocked him, were now the ones feeling pressure, wondering how someone so seemingly calm could have turned the tables entirely. Bruce's subtle movements, his quiet voice, his unwavering eyes, all of it combined to show a principle that could not be argued with. Mastery of self is mastery of every situation, and in that moment, inside that rising elevator, true strength had been revealed, not with violence, not with threats, but with something far more potent: self-control, awareness, and calm authority. Have you ever witnessed someone silence a room with calm confidence? Share your story in the comments below. The elevator continued its ascent, but everyone inside now knew something undeniable. Bruce Lee didn't need to fight to command respect. He had already done it. And that lesson, far louder than any punch, would stay with them long after the doors opened. The elevator doors hummed softly as they continued to rise. What had begun as a tense confrontation now carried a completely different energy. Bruce Lee's calm presence had shifted the dynamic entirely. The men who had tried to dominate him were now uneasy, their confidence crumbling silently. Every glance, every small movement betrayed it. Then it happened. One of the bystanders, someone who had remained quiet until now, couldn't hold it in. He whispered to another, "Guys, that's Bruce Lee, the real Bruce Lee." The words traveled like wildfire. Whispers turned into quiet murmurs. A few people checked again, their eyes widening in recognition. The martial artist? The one from the movies? The one with the philosophies? The men who had cornered Bruce shifted nervously. Their aggression had dissolved into uncertainty. The leader, who had earlier tried to intimidate him with words and proximity, swallowed hard. The arrogance that had carried him into this situation now seemed misplaced, almost naive. Bruce didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He had never needed to. His identity alone had begun to dismantle the illusions of control the others clung to. They had assumed he would react with fear or anger, but his silence and composure had already done the work. For him, the space in the elevator felt smaller now, but it wasn't just the walls. It was the realization, the mental weight of understanding they were outmatched. Not through combat, not through force, but through a quiet, undeniable mastery of self. The leader tried to regain control. "So, you're just going to stand there?" he asked, voice slightly trembling. "You're not going to do anything?" Bruce's eyes met his. Calm, measured, steady. He didn't smile, but there was an almost imperceptible hint of understanding. Not arrogance, not gloating. Just presence. His posture, the way he held himself, his unspoken command of the space, all of it said one thing clearly: "I don't need to do anything. You already see it." The bystanders leaned in slightly, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Phones had quietly been left to record the scene. Some whispered to each other, "He doesn't even have to fight. Look at him. He's already won." Even the men who had tried to assert dominance couldn't deny it. Their energy had been inverted. Fear calm, deep unspoken replaced their previous arrogance. The realization settled like a heavy weight. They were no longer in control. Bruce Lee's silent authority had overtaken the room. Finally, the elevator doors chimed, signaling The next floor, Bruce stepped forward slowly. His movements were measured, deliberate, unhurried. He didn't shove anyone aside. He didn't make a scene. He simply walked forward, letting his quiet power lead the way. The men who had cornered him instinctively stepped back, giving him space not out of fear of a punch, but out of recognition of mastery. They had been mentally bested, emotionally, disarmed, and all without a single strike. The bystanders let out quiet exclamations of awe. Cameras had captured the subtle shift, the moment when dominance changed without a fight. Bruce's calm, his unshakable awareness, had spoken louder than words or violence ever could as he walked past them. He finally spoke in a soft, deliberate voice. Respect is earned through understanding and self-control, not through fear or force. The words hung in the elevator like a lesson carved into the walls. The men who had tried to dominate him now understood the truth. They didn't need to be taught with aggression. They had experienced it directly in the stillness and composure of someone who had mastered himself. The doors opened. Bruce stepped out, and the elevator's interior seemed to exhale along with him. The atmosphere had shifted completely. The crowd inside the elevator, both bystanders and the men who had challenged him, were left in silent acknowledgement of what had just happened. Have you ever seen someone stay calm and completely turn a tense situation around? Share your story. In the comments below, in that brief enclosed space, a lesson had been delivered without violence, without threats, without words of anger. Bruce Lee had shown that the strongest force isn't physical. It's mental, emotional, and absolute. Control of oneself. The moment would stay with everyone in that elevator forever. A quiet, unforgettable victory born from the power of calm. The elevator doors opened, and Bruce Lee stepped out, calm, composed, unhurried. Every movement still radiated the same quiet authority that had held the confined space in awe just moments ago. The men who had tried to intimidate him now stood frozen, unable to fully process what had happened. Their arrogance had evaporated, replaced with a mixture of shock and respect. Outside, the bystanders couldn't stop whispering. Phones recorded every second of the encounter. Within hours, the clips began circulating online. Comments poured in from around the world. People marveled at the way Bruce had handled the situation, not with fists, not with anger, but with absolute self-control. Look at him. Not even moving, and he already owns the room. This is the real definition of power. Bruce Lee just taught a lesson no one will forget. The story went viral, shared across continents. In Tokyo, someone watched it on their commute and paused, mesmerized. In New York, someone else shared it with friends, debating how Bruce could command such presence without even raising his voice. In Manila, the hometown of many martial arts enthusiasts, people replayed the clip again and again, amazed at the mental strength he displayed. Bruce's lesson was simple but profound. Dominance is not about intimidation. It's not about yelling, pushing, or showing off. It's about presence, awareness, emotional control, and understanding your own strength without needing to prove it to anyone. Even the men who had cornered him were now humbled. One of them later admitted to a reporter, "I thought I could push him, scare him, but he didn't even need to fight. He just existed. And that was enough to make us back down." The elevator incident became more than a viral moment. It became a teaching. Example in self-discipline, emotional intelligence, and the power of calm authority. Martial arts communities dissected it, corporate trainers referenced it, and millions of people watched it simply to feel what it's like to be in the presence of someone who has mastered themselves. Be it Bruce didn't boast. He didn't gloat. He let the world interpret the story. His fame, his skills, his reputation, they were tools, not weapons in this moment. He had shown a deeper truth. That respect comes naturally to those who carry themselves with integrity and calm confidence. Social media posts highlighted the psychological mastery, calling it mind over ego, strength through stillness, and a masterclass in presence. Each replay reminded viewers that the most powerful victories are often invisible, subtle, and deeply human. And the final lesson was clear. You don't need aggression to assert your worth. You don't need force to command respect. True mastery is knowing who you are, remaining calm under pressure, and letting presence speak louder than words or fists ever could. If you believe true strength comes from calm confidence and self-control. Type respect in the comments and subscribe for more legendary stories like this one. The elevator doors closed again. Bruce Lee had moved on, but the impact remained. Every person who witnessed the encounter, whether in the elevator or online, carried the lesson with them. A reminder that mental strength can silence arrogance, emotional mastery can humble the bold, and calm presence can change any situation forever. And just like that, a short encounter in a small elevator became a global lesson in power, respect, and the quiet force of true mastery.